Human Rights Act, it sounds like a make-work scheme for lawyers, doesn't it?
Well, no, I don't think it is a make-work scheme for lawyers, because we're in Australia, we have got human rights charters like Victoria and the ACT. What we've seen is that the changes have been made at the policy making and legislation making and executive level, but not in the courts.
Well, what's the problem here, though? What problem in Australian society are you trying to fix with an act like this?
Well, as we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people think that they've got rights that in fact they don't have. People feel that they've got the right of freedom of movement, but in fact in Australia our rights aren't protected, and we don't have a framework to look at competing rights when we do see the freedom of movement versus the freedom of everybody else and the right to have health and the right to our healthy lives. So there are competing rights, and Australians want to see. Sorry,
Pauline, you could win me over. You could win me over with that, but we've got human rights bodies in this country now. We have a national, of course, Australian Human Rights Commission. They've been silent when it comes to the human rights that are being infringed around the country when it comes to pandemic responses now. We've had another really heavy-handed clampdown in South Australia today, but we don't have human rights bodies speaking up and demanding to know on what basis people's rights are being infringed. Surely this shows the sort of futility of these proposals rather than the need for them.
It actually shows the real need for it, because where you've got competing human rights, as we do in the pandemic, you need to have a framework to look at whether the measures that are being brought in by the government are proportionate to the threat and they don't outlast the threat. Because when people feel that the measures that are being taken are overly restrictive, that's when that agreement between the people and the government breaks down. And that's what we don't want to see in Australia. So far, most Australians have felt that the restrictions on their liberties have been reasonable given the danger presented by the pandemic. But if the restrictions become too great, people won't feel that way anymore. At the moment it's okay, but it may not be.
But that sounds like majority rule. That sounds like the majority gets to dictate the rights of the others. I thought human rights was about supporting the individual and minorities, and there are so many people in this country, I speak to them every day, whose livelihoods are being crushed by this overreaction to the pandemic, who can't see their families, who can't move interstate, whose businesses are shut down. How do they actually have any recourse to any way to protect their rights, to win back their freedoms?
Well, unfortunately, because we don't have a Charter of Rights in Australia, they don't have that ability. There is no ability to test whether these measures are affecting them as a minority unfairly. We don't have that protection here, and we need it. It's a forum whereby those sorts of conflicts can be resolved and can be dealt with by an independent umpire and looked at objectively to see whether in fact people are being treated unfairly. We can't do that in Australia at the moment, and I think there is a real case to be made that a Charter of Rights would help people in this instance.